Hello, hello. Yes, we're on. Welcome everybody today to our session. I'm standing here. My name is Sophie Kwizera. I work for ActionAid the Netherlands, but ActionAid is an international federation working in over 45 countries worldwide. And our focus is really to create justice. As this theme, the theme of Africa Day this year is climate justice, I would like to focus on the fact that ActionAid also works with communities, particularly women, to make sure that the climate action that is happening in the world is truly just and puts the voices of the people, the women, particularly at the center of these solutions. Maybe you can introduce yourself before I introduce the session as well.
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Milka, Yemane, and I'm a city councillor here in the municipality of Amsterdam for the Green Left Party, and I'm also the head of the international foundation GroenLinks, the Green Left Party. And what we do is actually we try to cooperate with different green organizations and green political parties in the Middle East and the Southeastern Europe by exchanging actually knowledge and trying to facilitate them as much as possible.
Thank you. So welcome all to today's session. And a unicum of this session is that Milka and myself met a couple of months ago to try and speak about how can we, and when I say we, is people from the continent, people with African roots, ourselves, help shape the narrative, but also the policies that concern the continent where we are from, which is Africa. So that's how we came up with this panel, where we want to put people with roots from Africa, but also today we have two distinguished guests from the continent themselves who are gonna, well, represent themselves and also share the voices truly coming from the continent. And we want to have these conversations today from the perspective of people that are too often sidelined or not included in the conversations that concern not only them specifically. So I'm talking about women, I'm talking about men or youth from the continent in policy development. So today we invite you to not just listen, but also try to engage in this conversation that I think is very much needed and should happen more often. And I would like to thank Africa Day, of course, for allowing us to create a space where diaspora voices are heard today.
Yes, thank you so much. Well, that was the introduction of the session, and I would like to start with our first panel conversation. And I would like to invite our first speakers, Abubakarr and Hilda. Please take a seat. Yes, of course. Thank you so much. So I think the introduction of Sophie was really clear. And just before we start, I would like to give Hilda the word. Hilda, you're an Ugandan climate activist and also the founder of Fridays for Future. Can you tell me a little bit about your motivation and why you started this?
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Yes, that's more like it. So I am Hilda. I'm a climate activist from Uganda, and I founded Uganda's Fridays for Future movement. We are a group of young people who are angry about the conditions that we stay in, but are not seated. We are standing up and defying means doing any climate action that we can in our power to create a difference in our communities. And that's from creating awareness, going to communities, planting trees, influencing policy, having talks with members of parliament in our country, trying to draft policies that we want to see changing, and making recommendations to our leaders and all that. And it started as a movement. I remember I was at the university and I had my first strike outside the university, and I was alone, and I tried to influence my friends into it. Slowly by slowly, they started joining, and now we are a movement of 54,000 students and youth.
Wow.
We work
right?
in...
Yes.
Woo, yeah.
That's amazing.
Come to the slide door.
Wow.
We work in 72 communities, and we have a network of 102 schools in Uganda. And I don't know, it's a lot. But what we do is we create climate awareness and advocacy, but starting from the grassroots up, because we believe that people who are affected by the climate crisis have a lot to share. They can draw on their experiences to offer solutions.
Yes.
So the recommendations we give to policymakers come directly from the grassroots communities and not from, professors or educated people.
That's really impressive and really amazing how you founded this, and actually by seeing your own need, what needs to be happening, and then also to do it, to be also a voice for a lot of grassroots initiatives. So that's really, really impressive. Today we're talking about changing the narratives. So we were talking about, like you were saying actually, so how do we make sure that those people who are affected most by the climate change and climate crisis, how can they get a seat at the table? So my question to you is also, how is the representation of African voices in the space of climate activism?
Well, I've seen that people of my generation are very ambitious and very determined. Over the past years, we've seen a growing or an increasing number of youth engaging in policy discussions around climate change, in climate activities, trying to influence the decision makers, joining climate events like COP and the SBs and all those other engagements, Wunga. And I've seen that youth are understanding the role that they have to play in combating climate change or being a part of the discussions that are being made. They are down in the grassroots, supporting communities, doing the action themselves. They are mobilizing in their hundreds and thousands, creating climate awareness on the ground. They're using social media to spread massive climate awareness. They're using every tool they have. When I look at Africa, Africa has so many young organizations, youth-led organizations that are coming up, and this is very impressive. It shows the need and the urgency of which we have to act as, people, as Africans who face the effects of climate change. But also there is an increasing pressure to see change. And clear example is during COP last year in Egypt, the loss and damage decision that was passed. I believe it's because of the youth climate movement. We pushed, we had strikes, we did everything we could to make sure that we have a loss and damage decision made. And if it wasn't for youth, I don't think we would have moved that far. And youth have really, really created a very big difference in the climate movement that has been there for years. But just in the few years they have been there, it has really changed. But I think
maybe it's not even that there was a space already, but it's more that the youth took their space. They owned that space.
Yes, so they took their space, they claimed it. But I think it's not enough because we are not listened to. We are heard, but we are not listened to. There's a very big difference. We've been speaking, we've been on the streets striking, we've been mobilizing, but still the amount of action towards what we demand is very little. And of course, when you see the representation in the decision-making spaces is still very low, I think and believe women and youth have to be center in all decision-making platforms, because what is being decided is for our future, so we must have a say. But we are always present, but not represented. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, thank you so much. No, amazing, amazing. Thank you so much, Hilda. So your neighbor here, Abubakarr, you are the founder of the Sierra Leone Youth Initiative, and you are a CD4D ambassador for the IOM, the International Organization of Migration. Abubakarr, you are a Dutch with diasporian roots, right? Could you tell us a little bit about what you do actually in representing African voices from your diaspora standpoint?
First of all, let me say thanks to the organizers of this event to provide me the opportunity to sit here and talk about these issues. I'm a Sierra Leonean. I am living in Tilburg. Is there anyone from Tilburg here, Brabant? Yeah, that is not the case. That is always what we see. But this tells you a very important thing. You know, when it matters, organizing this event is mostly in Amsterdam, Rotterdam, Utrecht. But these events are not organized in Brabant areas. And that means also that for us living in those areas, it becomes a challenge to ensure that people in Brabant understand the role of diasporans in the economies
I
of
see
those
someone
places.
from Drenthe.
Is that
She's like,
someone
yes,
from
yes,
Drenthe?
yes.
Yeah.
Drenthe, Emmen,
Yeah. But the question is, as a diaspora, first of all, conceptually, the African Union Commission defines a diaspora as Africans out of the African continent. But those Africans out of the African continent that are willing to invest in Africa. So the definition itself has two roles. One is ideological. You are from Africa, you share the same history and background. But the other one is how proactive are you in investment in Africa, in this case, in my case, Sierra Leone. So I have been what we call proactive, very proactive diasporans, because you have diasporans that are active. We also have a proactive diasporans. And because of that proactiveness, I was given the role from the IOM to serve as CD4D ambassador. CD4D actually is connecting diaspora for development. A number of us have been selected, 10 of us from different countries to represent the IOM at different points. And what our role is to provide lectures at different levels, both at school, universities, and if you are a lecturer, is there any lecturer here? Are you a lecturer, and what do you lecture? Okay, now great. If you need the diaspora to come and tell our stories, please let us know, because that's our role.
Thank you so much.
So that is what we do.
Yes, very impressive, very impressive. So I think for you, the role of the diaspora here in the Netherlands is pretty clear. But how about more in the public arena? So let's say in policy making, do you think that there's a role, and what should be the role of the diaspora?
Actually, it's a very interesting question, because the question that I'm here to answer is indeed what is the role of the African diaspora in the public arena, and secondly, the role of diasporans in the policy development and implementation. These are two different questions. But let me just say something, that the entire world leaders, governments signed the compact of the Sustainable Development Goals. And the most fundamental goal is Goal 16, which talks about partnership, both government, private sector, and civil society organizations. And there is a realization that civil society organizations play a very fundamental role in getting partnerships from both the West and the Africans or South, people living in the South. And the diasporans form an integral part of that civil society in the first place. So we cannot, and I repeat, we cannot achieve SDG 16 and the entire SDGs without the diaspora. There is no way you can exclude them from the picture. Yeah. But in Holland, it's a very interesting country. Of course, I'm very proud to be a Dutch African at the same time. I want to be very proud that we are here, but we need to do more. Now, let me give you an example, two examples. One, if you go deep into literature, of course, I'm not a scientist, I'm a practitioner, you see that we have the Dutch policy that was written in 2022, and that heet Doen waar Nederland goed in is. It's 2022 to 2024. Fantastic document. And also, you read the Netherlands strategy document for Africa for 2023 to 2032. You will see that the achievements of the UN Sustainable Goals are fundamental. It's at the heart of the Dutch foreign policy, especially when you look at the investment in agriculture, women affairs, water, and partnerships and security. These are the heart of the Dutch international relationships. But what is interesting to note is that in the development of these policy documents that I've just mentioned, I did not remember that we, the diasporans sitting here, are involved in that process. I don't know if I'm wrong. Am I wrong? If I'm wrong, you put your hand up and you say, Abubakarr.
We will talk about it.
This is wrong, so we will
talk about it in
the next session. We will talk about it. But I see the importance of what you're saying, and I think everyone can feel it as well. So thank you so much for also defining again what the role of the diaspora is.
But I want to mention the other one. That is the implementation. Now that we are excluded from the development of those policies, we are already implementing those policies. They are in the different countries. There are thousands of Africans here in Holland that are involved in the development of their countries, either through remittances, network transfer, or knowledge transfer. We are already doing that. And we are doing that with passion. And so the question is, we have to recognize what these Africans are doing, and we need to bring them on the table and talk. Of course, there are challenges. The challenge we have as Africans ourselves, we are this fragmented. I want to be very, very authoritative to say here that the African community is this fragmented. And that is actually the pain side of the whole story. But I'm sure if we can come together, we can sit and talk business with the Dutch government. And I'm sure that will come.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Abubakarr. Thank you. I was wondering if there are some questions from the audience, whether it's for Hilda or for Abubakarr. I have two people with a mic. I see a question here and there. Maybe if you can...
Hi, I'm Lucia Lindner. I did fieldwork a long time ago about into Ghanaian migration. And at those days, a little bit later, I was also still working with African organizations in The Hague. And then one time for research, I think this was around 2002, I looked in the registration of the Kamer van Koophandel, and there were 52 Ghanaian organizations registered. And I think it's really a sign of the organization power of the diaspora, or the Ghanaian diaspora in this sense, but also of the fragmentation, because it were like local representatives of, I don't know, all kind of regions. And I wonder, because I think sometimes there is some kind of structure of these organizations meeting, like having a national meeting.
Okay.
Does it still exist?
If there is a national meeting, or if there is room for a national meeting, can you quickly elaborate
just quickly.
on that?
Let me just, of course, the Ghanaian story, I can't lament on that, but I can tell you about Sierra Leone. I'm a Sierra Leonean. There are 6,000 Sierra Leoneans in Holland, and we have a national platform. I used to be one of their presidents 4 years, but now I'm a pensioner. I'm just giving advices when necessary. But here we have a national platform, and this national platform during the Ebola, you remember, 2014, we had terrible Ebola virus in Sierra Leone. We were involved with the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs in that Ebola platform, and we gathered items here, including medicine and everything here, placed those items in the Dutch ship that went to West Africa. You remember, I don't know the name again. And so there is. But what we need is, we are seen as volunteers. We need to continue to be volunteers in this particular scenario. We need further assistance, and that has not been coming, and we'll continue to push. I want to say thanks to the Wilganza and the IOM in this regard. These are excellent organizations, and I've been trying to engage the diaspora. And to Georgina, thank you again for your constant perseverance in ensuring that diasporans are pictured in society.
Let's go to the next question.
Abubakarr, I'm a Sierra Leonean. I like very much your input over the diaspora. I give you a very short story.
But it should be a question, sorry.
Because of the time. No, it's very interesting for him.
Maybe that could be later. Could you please ask a question,
My question is, how do we combat corruption in Africa? And the reason why I say so is because when I was doing my PhD at the Free Universities, I got funding from the EU to go to Freetown to establish an academic cooperation.
Sorry, sir. It should really be a question, if you don't mind. I'm so sorry, but because of time, we have to go to the next panel.
But if we talk about the diaspora, I mean, I'm from the diaspora, and I want to contribute. I've done something. I've got money to invest in Sierra Leone, and you stop me, then you don't.
I think you got the question, right?
Yes, I got the question. Yes. That is what we do about corruption. Now, corruption, what is corruption in the first place? When you look at the public arena, that's what people say here. Africa is corrupt. But mind you, Holland is also corrupt to some extent. So again, I'm coming. Again, I'm coming. I think we have to be patient with one another. We have to be patient with the systems there in Africa. We live in the extended family system. By the time you have a job, there are hundreds of people depending on your salary alone. So all these things had to. So can we have this in total time? Let us have this in the face-to-face.
He will be here the rest of the day, and we will have to hear.
I'm not the government.
Thank you so much for your question. Thank you. For you, the last question. Yes.
Oh, hi. This is for Hilda and Abubakarr. First of all, thank you so much for being here. It's an honor to be here with you. I'm from the United States, and I'm just curious. I work in environmental justice there. I'm curious, what have your strategies been to build power in the Netherlands? And have you had any like successes building power, and have you had any successes with respect to co-governance, right? And what you were talking about, getting government to actually listen to you and to be heard. So that's my question.
Maybe Hilda, is that something that you could elaborate on? So maybe.
Well, I'm not based in the Netherlands, so I'll answer from a Ugandan perspective. I have experience working with the Ugandan government. So what we do how to build power is we work with communities that are affected, or the grassroots communities. We sensitize them about climate change because climate change is not taught in schools, and once we know that they understand the problem, then we try to build solutions together. But these solutions have to come from them, so we do not impose the solutions. We build these solutions together with the grassroots communities, and then if it needs fundraising, we fundraise together. If it's a policy recommendation that we have to take to the government, we take it there. But we also work with the local government because they also have the power to implement and to recommend us to the members of parliament, for example, who take on the recommendations to the president. But this is a lengthy process. And in most cases, the government doesn't respond, and also sometimes the local government doesn't respond. And in this case, I've seen an example is we usually organize climate strikes or protests, which are very peaceful. And Uganda laws require us to inform the police. We do inform the police, but they don't respond. So we go on the streets and they arrest us over and over again. But then we have the written notice. They did not respond, and activities have to go on. So this is some of the challenges that we face. We put our requests or demands forward, but they don't respond. And for 5 years, we've requested the Ugandan government to have climate education part of the study curriculum, and until now, it hasn't been implemented, which is really very tough. But what we do, we take the education to the grassroots, we take the education to the people as an organization, and we work together with them to create solutions.
Yeah, so if it's not given by the government, you will take it actually as your own way, and you through it education and try to educate the people.
Yeah, it's very tiresome and long, but we try to do it that way.
Wow, thank you so much. Can I have a big applause for these amazing speakers? Thank you so much. We will now go on to the second panel that will be moderated by Sophie. And in the meanwhile, we will look at the trailer, maybe 2 sentences about what we're going to watch.
This is a trailer.
With your mic.
This is a trailer of a movie that was made for me, around the job that I do between Tilburg, connecting Tilburg and Sierra Leone. And it is made by Omroep Tilburg. There's also a way of capturing the things that migrants are doing in the society, connecting a win-win situation, connecting Tilburg to Sierra Leone and Andersomok. So it's a nice thing and very emotional for me particularly, but I'm sure you will enjoy it. And the full movie is available. If you want it, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
We nemen je vanuit Tilburg mee naar Freetown, de hoofdstad van het West-Afrikaanse land Sierra Leone. Freetown en Tilburg hebben namelijk iets gemeenschappelijk. Abubakarr Bangura. We volgen deze Tilburger tijdens zijn verblijf in Freetown begin 2022 in het kader van het project Een Wereld te Winnen.
Nice beaches, friendly people. We are friendly people who come to our heads. SCP, come to empower women in Sierra Leone.
Tussen Tilburg en Freetown.
Ik ben geboren in Sierra Leone en ik woon nu in Tilburg in Nederland al 20 jaar.
Hij werkt vanuit Tilburg mee aan de wederopbouw van het land door allerlei projecten te starten op het gebied van ondernemerschap, onderwijs.
Dit gebouw die heb ik gebouwd compleet vanaf scratch.
En infrastructuur.
Vanuit Nederland doe ik heel veel dingen hier. Onder andere ondersteun ik een grote landbouwproject in mijn dorp.
Abubakarr zet zich al jaren in voor het land dat hij meer dan 20 jaar geleden vanwege de burgeroorlog ontvluchtte.
Als je als mensen denken dat je het regime ondersteunt, word je letterlijk afgepakt en echt de banden van de auto op je nek. En die worden echt, ja, dat is crazy.
Ik dacht, laat het maar. Van mij uit.
I think that was a very powerful documentary, so know how to find Abubakarr later to ask some questions. Now we have 3 other very relevant and interesting panel members who I would like to introduce, starting from Didier. Didier Rwema is a policy advisor at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He works on EU-Africa policies. He has previously worked on the EU delegations to the UN and also has some NGO background as well. So we're very happy to have him here. Next to DJ, my colleague from Ethiopia, whom I'm very happy that she traveled this week to be in different panels and different conversations about the continent concerning climate change. Tinebeb Berhane, she is a leader in civil society in Ethiopia. She's a fighter for human rights, women's rights especially. She has done a lot of work on humanitarian aid and continues to work towards development of the continent, but also of her country and her people. Welcome. And last but not least, we have Georgina here, and of course, we also are happy to have you here today. Georgina is the founder of Pimp My Village. It is an initiative that empowers diaspora to start projects in their country of origin, and she will tell us a little bit more about that later. But Georgina is also a communications advisor, amongst many other things. So welcome, Georgina, as well. I would like to start with Tinebeb today, because I know we prepared quite some questions also to have your views on this second round of conversation. The first one was really about what do we see? How can we set a scene on changing the narrative? So what are the observations within the field, not just in diaspora world in the Netherlands, but also from the continent itself? In this round, we really want to talk about what are the solutions? What have we already been doing in the field of policy, but also of concrete action, and in the spaces of NGOs to really challenge this narrative and put the voices of those often sidelined at the center of the solutions for the African continent. Tinebeb, can I please start with you? My first question to you is, how can we make sure that people from the continent, particularly women, youth, but also men, of course, from the continent, are centered in policy making specifically around the African continent?
Thank you very much, Sophie, and thank you for the audience for having me this week. I would like to say, I would like to start by saying that this struggle on the climate crisis is and has to be personal for me, but not only political. Why I'm saying that is from where I sit, from where I see myself. The last thing I really would like to see is for my children to blame me for doing nothing or too little about the climate crisis in their space, in their country, and across the world. Because I cannot bear that my children ask me, "What did you do? You have been in this space for a long time. You have been a powerful leader in civil society and global leader as well. So what did you do?" I feel very much privileged to bring that voice in every space that I am. I feel like every one of you here in this room are also privileged to do so. So one of the things that civil society leaders do in every context is creating that space for people to speak up, for communities' voice to be amplified. This week, since last Sunday, that's what I'm trying to do. Whenever I speak in front of those 85,000 people on the climate launch, on the marches, I brought my community's voice. It matters. It matters in every policies, in every strategies that's been developed, because it is all about them. It cannot be the case that any single policy developed without the participation of communities who are mostly affected by this crisis. And all stories have to be told, and it has to be told by the people themselves. We cannot speak on behalf of them because we are not the ones that our homes is swept away, that their plantation is swept away, that their children and families are killed because of the flood and the drought. So it is very, very critical to break all the barriers that inhibits communities' voice in these every spaces that we are managing. So bringing communities' voice and women and young people especially around all negotiations of climate justice, all the decision-making processes, and every single policy development process is very, very crucial because they know how that situation is impacting their lives. As we speak now, in my country, in Somali region, the flood displaced 300,000 people from their communities. It is just a news from yesterday and the day before yesterday. Out of 300,000, some people are actually died. And out of that, women and children are among them. So when we speak this situation, it's real. It's very, very real. It's not too far. And I come from that community. So I feel like, as a feminist leader, I feel like I am so obliged, to use my power in a very responsible way to amplify their voices in every single space that I have. So this is one of the very, very crucial points that civil society should play across the world.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And then I want to move forward to you, Georgina, first. So don't be too quick to give away the mic, because you work in the Netherlands on visibility. And my question to you is also hearing Tinebeb and the two panelists before. Why visibility? Why are we talking about that? And why are we having such a conversation today here on stage? Can you elaborate a little bit on that, also based on all the work you do with Pimp My Village?
Yes, well, visibility is, we're talking about a target group that is not involved. We're talking about the diaspora, and Abubakarr was saying this. So when years ago, I worked for television, and I was actually, I don't know how to say different, but in like a white community, people were not thinking about Africans, and I was actually in the program because I had a color, so it was very typical. And at that moment, nobody, we were doing a lot of fundraising, and but I was the only colored girl doing the fundraising. And then I was looking at my father, who was also in the garage, like the picture we saw you, putting in hospital beds and putting in everything. And nobody knew about this, and he was busy with his dream, building a hospital in Ghana. So I decided to get a friend of mine and film this and show it and view this and make it visible to the public. And people were so enthusiastic. I was lucky because I was working for TV, so I had famous friends. Everybody's coming there. We did fashion shows. So that was a lucky thing, But after that, people saw it, and people were really surprised. We were in a very hip bar, like in Amsterdam, and people were like, wow. Like, for instance, Abubakarr would say something, and they would be like, wow, he's doing this project himself. That's great, because he knows the culture, he knows the language, and he should be, the one who's giving back and communicating to the Dutch about it and working together. So that's how visibility started, that I was thinking, okay, so the diaspora should be involved and should be visible. And Pimp My Village I started later, after also making a documentary about my father's work, to show others, that like, look, these are the diaspora, and we filmed them and showed them, because we should be leading. we should be leading in the visibility. You can't talk about something and changing the narrative if it's not there. So we should be leading and changing the narratives ourselves by showing people what has been done. So that's why I'm really happy with the documentary. Later on, I'll tell about what I did to change the narrative, but we should be leading.
And then maybe we can go to our distinguished guests from the Dutch government, of course, whom are in charge of developing policies and whom we asked today to come give us reflections in terms of policies that are currently being developed that not only concern African people, but of course, ideally also in this conversation should include the African voices, whether it's diaspora from the Netherlands or communities on the ground themselves. Maybe we can start with a short elaboration on what the Africa strategy is. I know some of you have already heard about the Africa strategy throughout the day, but I would like to give you the floor to maybe short explain to us what this strategy is all about.
Of course. Thank you very much, Sophie. So the Africa strategy was published, let's say, a couple of months ago in June. It's a strategy for the Netherlands for the upcoming 10 years in its relationship with Africa. It's a broad strategy encompassing human rights, access to education, economy, climate. It's a very broad strategy encompassing as well a lot of other Dutch strategies. And a lot of questions I get about the strategy is what is new about it? And the thing that is new, in my opinion, is that for the first time in Dutch history, we have put together all of the different streams of policies we had and looked at the African continent and said, what does it mean for our relationship with Africa? And how are we supposed to look at the continent, talk with the continent, but also with the diaspora? So thank you very much, Abubakarr, for your comment on the strategy. And I wanted to say that in the formulation of the strategy, we have consulted diaspora in the Netherlands, but also local communities in Africa, women groups, and a lot of different actors. I think more than 100 people or groups were consulted in the formulation of that strategy. And it is a lens to look through with the diaspora to achieve our goals with Africa, but also to listen first to what does Africa want, what does Africa need, and what is Africa doing on the global stage, and how can we enforce and empower that?
Thank you very much. Before we go into the how, specifically further, I would like to come back to Tinebeb on another question that will also link back to Didier from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You have already elaborated a little bit on the feminist element within policy making and whom are most impacted by the lack of good policies, maybe, or even existing policies currently. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit more on what it means to have a feminist lens in terms of policy making generally?
Thank you, Sophie. So I think we need to demystify the notion of feminism when we work around it, because there is this misconception that people will consider it as putting women in power. At least from where I come from, the global south, that is mostly how it's understood, but that's not really the reality. It is all about, making systems change, where we move from patriarchal and capitalistic system, where making profit is motivation number one, to a system that centers the well-being of the people and the planet. This is how we understand feminism, and it's a very, very crucial aspect. There are 5 things that are very key to me when we use feminist lens in our climate crisis to struggle. It means that we challenge the issue from the systematic level and structural level. It's a system change from, the patriarchal thinking and patriarchal systems and attitude up to the climate finance and beyond. Secondly, it means it anchors the climate crisis from the justice point of view, whether it's human rights or ecological rights. So it's all about justice. So when we deal with that, when we talk about it today and throughout the week and maybe beyond, we frame it in a way that it is a justice. It's a right of people to live in a dignified way. And we have to make sure that we have to hold ourselves accountable for that. So this is what we mean by when we put feminist lens, that's what we are talking about. And third, it demands the frontline communities, especially women and the young people, the most vulnerable one, the most affected ones, around the table of negotiation in every climate negotiations and dialogues, whether it is in the Netherlands, whether it is in other worlds, everywhere, from the global north to the global south. And fourth, it also demands partnership and solidarity, not colonial system or extravism. This is what we mean by feminist lens. And finally, it's also analyze the climate crisis from dismantling the power dynamics in all this. The power of economy, the power of capitalism, the power of this and that, you know. So when we talk about feminist lens in this climate struggle, we mean that we need to destabilize, or we need to shift the power from those who are holding it tightly because they really, really want to hold and sustain their economies to those countries who are affected by that position and by that decision that is made somewhere in the global north. So this is what we understand by feminism in our work in ActionAid.
Thank you. Georgina, before we come back to DJ, and then also, of course, come back to you guys for some questions, so start reflecting on them and preparing them. Of course, my question to you is how as well? How do you do this? How do you collaborate with other NGOs, other platforms to really create this visibility that you just introduced to us?
Well, thank God I got the chance to start a project, because that's why Abubakarr is here and as an IOM ambassador, CD4D ambassador. A few years ago, I was talking to IOM, and it's International Organization for Migration, and we were talking about changing the narrative and showing people, because people are so negative about migrants, migration, diaspora, don't know the work they do. So I said, okay, we could do an ambassadors program, because I think you should put them in the lead, as I was saying. So this is an example of what we did, and I think other NGOs could try to do similar things. We started with the ambassadors program, and we started choosing 10 ambassadors of the group we had of Diaspora that we knew were doing very good projects in their countries of origin. So we selected these 10. Then we did a real professional photo shoot, because you wanted them to look as professionals, look good, and feel comfortable with it. And we put them on the website. We had the space there. And then we said, okay, these are the CD4D Connecting Diaspora for Development ambassadors. Next to the photo shoot, we made sure they could be moderating on events, like Abubakarr was saying. We put them in the public eye. We showed people their work. We had a LinkedIn page, and in the beginning it was like almost nobody there. And then we just published the stories of their work, of what they were doing, but really close to people, close also to the Dutch public. You know, they could really think, oh, this is nice, and understand what they're doing. So that's, I think, a few things that NGOs could do to look at the diaspora that they're working with, maybe even have an advisory board consisting of some diaspora, but also some Dutch people who are in the public who could also say, hey, you should do this or that because I'm missing that. So if you have the advisory board, make sure you tell the stories and you publish the stories, and you make sure they are here in these events. So that's things that we did, and I hope other NGOs will do, and platforms.
Thank you. Very well. And then before we come back to the audience, of course, we want to go back to how did it actually happen that you included voices from the diaspora, but also from the continent in developing policies like the Africa strategy, but also reflecting a little bit on the feminist explanation of Tinebeb about what a feminist lens really is about. Of course, we also know that the Netherlands has a feminist foreign policy, which should interlink all the policies that the Netherlands is doing concerning foreign affairs. Can you maybe reflect on how did we include voices from the diaspora from the south, and also the Dutch government also tries to talk about leading from the south. What does that actually mean? Where are we going towards? How do we understand it when the Dutch government also tries to center the voices of those that need to be centered. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. We do indeed have a foreign feminist policy. And looking at the African continent and with the Africa strategy in mind, it's important to note that if we look at the African continent, it's leading the world in female entrepreneurship, for instance. If we look at South Africa, Botswana, Ghana, but also Nigeria, you have a rate of female entrepreneurship that's above the 40% in all of those countries. And Doen waar Nederland goed in is, which was referred at before, is a Dutch policy to combine foreign trade, but also development cooperation. And for instance, South Africa and Ghana are both concerned in that strategy in which we need to look to Africa with a different lens of, instead of saying we need to help Africa. There is a lot going on. There is a lot of energy. There's a lot of potential. We need to see how can we empower what is already going on. And in those two countries, South Africa and Ghana, for instance, with both the female foreign policy, feminist foreign policy, but also the combination policy, we need to see how we can improve the means of trade, commerce, to already build upon what is there. So the Africa strategy, looking with a feminist policy lens, is not a way to see what we can do for you, but what is there going on and how can we build upon that. But also to implement that Africa strategy, we will need the diaspora to implement it. In EU policy, we promised to mobilize $150 billion euros between now and 2027 in the Global Gateway Strategy, and the Netherlands wants to do its bit. But it's impossible to build solid links and investment flows, both continents coming back and forth, without the diaspora. It will not hold for the upcoming 20 years if we put in money now and forget about it. We need to mobilize the energy we have here, the knowledge we have here with the diaspora, and see how we can interlink both continents together in a durable way.
Thank you very much. I would like to go on and ask them questions, but of course I want to give you guys the floor as well to have some interaction with the audience. I would beforehand, before I need to interrupt you, maybe ask you to keep it short and concise so our speakers can also have some time to reflect on your question. Thank you.
So, hi, my name is Salim. And just to your last answer, I didn't really get still, how are you making sure that the diaspora is represented in policies, in the discussions? Because everyone understands that it's important to include us, but how are you doing it?
We have several ways of doing it. For instance, we have youth advisory committees that we consult on a regular basis and also ask to look at our policy documents and comment on them, give advice, and we follow that up. We also have different networks that we ask to provide us with feedback and also ideas to build upon. And if I look at how Dutch policy is being made and followed up, usually we consult a lot of different stakeholders, but also a lot of stakeholders who knock on our doors. And that combination builds policy. The government is not all-seeing. We cannot look behind every door, but a thing as simple as sending an email to our government email address will get followed up by policy officers. So it's an invitation, in one sense, for us to know as a government what is going on, where is the diaspora, how can we make use of their knowledge, but also of the diaspora, as a lot of business groups are doing at the moment, knocking on the door of government and asking how can this be taken upon. So in a sense, I would say that our vision isn't perfect. We are consulting a lot of diaspora groups, but also then the question is which groups are giving which noise, and do the different diaspora groups among each other agree that it is well enough represented and that all the bases are covered. The answer will always be no, and my invitation in that sense is, if you are organized or not, knock at the door, talk, and organize, if possible, even better.
I have 3 little questions for. Oh.
No, it's okay. You started, okay.
Sorry. One of them is, when you talk about the African continent, are you talking about all the countries, or are there certain regions that you don't take into consideration? The second one is, what's in it for the Netherlands to put all of this help? And the third one is, do you also fund organizations that want to do independent work on the continent without interference, too much interference from the Dutch government?
So I will ask you to repeat the question along the way because I have a bad memory.
Maybe I can.
The first question was the whole continent. The short answer is yes. With the Africa strategy, we've looked at throughout the whole continent. We've done away with the division of above the Sahel and beneath the Sahel, so it's the whole continent. Question 2, what's in it for the Netherlands? I think everything is in it for the Netherlands. Africa is the future in terms of economic growth. It is also the continent where the most actions need to be done and can be done for the climate change, prevent at least adaptation, mitigation, and reap the most result in a sense. Security is a big argument. Sorry?
You're forgetting loss and damages.
Loss and damages. All policy areas which are translated in the strategy are in it for the Netherlands, but also for the African continent. So both have a lot to gain. Peace and security, multilateralism. Yeah, I would not know what is not in it for the Netherlands in that sense.
And the last question is, how do you support organizations that want to operate without the interference of the government?
And without interference of the government, you meaning the government in the country, which government? The Netherlands? So how do we support organizations that want to get involved without our own intervention?
Yes.
That's what how do you make money possible without controlling what the money is going to be used for, basically?
How the money is going to be used for? That's an interesting question. We do not control in that sense, but we have a couple of parameters between which we have to justify making use of public funds, which you are all the owners of. And we have to be transparent in that fact, but we are not telling people what to do or not to do, or which ideological affiliation or which economical principle to follow in the continent. So we do not control that. We just want a transparent process where everyone has a fair chance and knows what the rules are, and that's our gatekeeping function in that sense.
Thank you very much. I'll take one more question. I'm sorry, we don't have that many minutes anymore. So go ahead, ma'am.
Okay. Yes, I'll try to be very, very short. One of the things that I like about Tinebeb is because she gave specific actions for us to follow. Every time that she intervenes, she tells us what exactly she needs from us. So I am Diaspora, I am here. I want to know, what can I do to contribute? I know for climate change is fine, but in the sense of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, what are the projects, specific projects that they need, Diaspora, and how can we help? And at the bottom of this, because you said that you listen to the African population and African communities, what they need. So tell us what they need so we can also help. I know that is in our court as well to look for initiatives where we can contribute, but you guys have the resources and have the information available that we can contribute to. So.
Thank you for the question. If I have to say what Africa needs, talking for the Dutch government, I would say that the information on what Africa needs is told to us by Africa. And for the Dutch Africa strategy, we've used the 2063 agenda of the African Union as a blueprint, in which the African Union has set out with all the African countries what the vision is, on which policy areas, what has to be done. If you look at the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, for instance, or other big policy areas in which the continent itself has decided this is our future, this is what we're trying to achieve. And my advice to you would be, not to ask in that sense the Dutch government, what does Africa need, but to look at those policy documents at which we are looking as well, and find an area for yourself or an idea for yourself of how can I contribute to that, have your idea ready, and knock at the door as well, get organized. But the source of what Africa needs, you can find in African documents and what Africa has said to the world by itself.
Thank you very much for those reflections. I would like to thank all the public for the questions. Please know how to find us after this session, but I would like to give the other two of our panelists also some final reflections to give to the audience and take away after this session. Tinebeb, maybe you can start.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just want to capitalize on the question that's asked by my sister over there. And from where I sit, we acknowledge the space and the power, the diaspora community, the African diaspora. You guys have a space that's mostly not the case for most of us back home. You have the connections, you have the resources, you have the knowledge, and most importantly, you are living in the countries where they are contributing to the pollution of our continent. So that means you have the space, you have the power. So 5 things, practical things, I would like from you. One is increased representation of the people, particularly women and young people from the African continent in the political, economic, social decision-making bodies. Make it happen in a very clear, transparent way. You know, I don't know how, but you can do it. Second, implement and enforce anti-discriminatory policies within institutions to address systematic racism. And the third, strengthen civil society organizations and grassroots movements on the continent and in the African diaspora to empower individuals to advocate for their rights and interests. And the fourth one is foster international collaboration and solidarity to address issues faced by Africans globally, and support the initiatives that promote cultural exchange, understanding, and collaboration on a global scale. And the last one is please be politically proactive, not active. Proactive for the right politicians and leaders to be in power so that they come up with an inclusive and right policy that works for all of us in a just way.
Well, I'm just going to say something about visibility and something for the government. Visibility, that's also a point for me. Please show yourself. Please post that you are here and show your work to everybody. So all the diaspora, please do this, okay? And to the government, I remember years ago that we had these meetings and the African diaspora came together and we were asked what we needed, how we could work together. I miss these meetings. And I think the other diaspora also miss these meetings. I don't know why they're not there anymore. And I hope if you need us, please find us or through the platforms, organize these consultation days again, because they were really good and helped both ways, I think.
Thank you. Okay. This was the conclusion of our session, Changing the Narrative. This was organized by the International Foundation of GroenLinks and ActionAid. And of course, we had collaborations with Pimp My Village, IOM, but also a good representative from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you all for listening, and please let's keep in touch. Milka wants to say something about the next event on the Green Youth Movement in the MENA region. Make sure you join that session to continue the conversation. And again, everyone, thank you very much for participating.